Well, Claudio, welcome to Crested Butte for the first time, and welcome to Blister headquarters.
There's no snow outside. I don't know what you're doing with all these skis.
Well, there's snow. You just have to. You gotta work for it a little bit to go find it. But
Okay.
we've actually still been getting some ski time out. But it's mostly bikes right now. Bikes and running. So you're right about that. Um, well, listen. It's cool having you here, and certainly great having you here. Given like we are literally right on the heels of the World Cup season, and turns out we had a pretty nice end of the season out there in Snowshoe, West Virginia.
Well, not only an end of the season, I'd say the whole season was pretty incredible. But yes, it only ramped up, and every race went crazier and crazier. And I think we're excited about every World Cup season. Maybe it's just us forgetting about how crazy the last one was, and then you think this is the most amazing season we've ever had, because I know that we say that almost every year. But yes, I mean, Loic and Amaury did put on an absolutely amazing show, so yeah.
Yeah, and I think that is what I want to try to do a little bit in this conversation is talk a bit about this season, but then try to do that difficult thing of providing a bit of context to what we just saw. Because there has been, I mean, a number of people, I think quite legitimately, are either claiming or are raising the question of like, did we just witness the best World Cup season ever? And you're a guy who's been around, seen a few things, witnessed a few races, and so I figured you'd be a good, person to have weigh in on this. Which brings me to kind of, one of my first questions is, where does your own knowledge of like the history of DH begin? How far back do you go?
Well, that goes to '93 when I started racing. I started riding before that, but the first race was '93, but that wasn't even a downhill, that was cross country. And that was at the end of '93, and then the first actual season was a winter season, which was cyclocross racing.
Yeah.
So first couple of years as a junior, I did everything from cyclocross to cross country to track and even road. And only in '95 or so, on a training ride, I discovered the BMX track, and I did a couple of laps on it with my cross-country bike, and I loved it so much that for the whole rest of the winter, I spent my time on the BMX track. So when we went back into the cross-country season, I obviously wasn't very fast on the climbs, but I was extremely fast on the downhill. So I thought, well, let's try out a downhill race, and that got me fully into it, like nothing else matters.
Yeah, yeah.
And so then the first real downhill season was 96, 97, and one of the two. No. Maybe 96, I think.
Let's call it 96. Yeah. Huh. So, who do you first remember watching racing, or did you have any favorite racers that you just thought these people are amazing, or you're like, I kind of want to emulate that riding style or something?
Actually, not that much. The big names back then, by the way, it was 97, because in 96 it was that transition year where I tried to do both.
Huh.
But that was before me. There were people able to do that, racing both cross country and downhill. But at that time, it was already too different. Yeah, and then the big names were obviously Nico Vujo, and then the whole California gang with Mike King, Eric Carter, Steve Peat was training out there too. So it was always a big thing to go to San Diego or Los Angeles in the winter time and train there with everyone there. Brian Lopes, obviously. Mm-hmm. Dave Cullinan was in the pack there, so it was a really, really good scene. I spent most of my days in California on the dirt jump spots that they had, the trails. Um, you know, Sheep Hills was the most famous one, but they had all of these amazing spots, and those are also actually the spots that got me into trail building, just digging with the people there. But yeah, today it's racing, not building.
Today it's racing. Right now it's racing.
So yes, it was those names from the 90s that I was riding with and inspired by, but I didn't have one big idol that I wanted to follow.
Okay, so snowshoe. I have to say I can't remember the last sporting event that I was just on the couch watching, where I was literally shaking, straight up shaking, like over the last two runs after Amaury's run. And I thought, well, that's it. That was amazing. And we're done here. And then we see Loic, and now we're building drama, and then Danny's. But I guess I'm particularly interested to have you talk a little bit about Amaury's run and Danny's run, because you talk about this a lot during broadcasts. Like, it's not about perfection, it's about riding at the limit and these kind of things. But Amaury's run just looked so freaking impressive to me. In some ways, I'd say more than Danny's. And I guess, given that I think we can call you a professional, a professional weigher inner on these issues or something like that. Talk to me about, like, look, when you were witnessing this or seeing this, like, you didn't have that impression at all. Amaury's was impressive, but through your eyes, what Danny was doing on that track, was that obvious to you at the time? Like, that is the run?
I think it came down to that one rock section that was called the Rocksecutioner Zone. I remember that Danny Hart made up, I think, 1.5 seconds in that one rock section, and that's where he won the race, and that's also where he decided about the overall. Because if he had been in between Amaury and Loic, then Amaury would have taken the overall. But since he was in front of Amaury, then Amaury couldn't score enough points, so that means that Loic kept the overall. And so I actually don't 100% remember if it was totally obvious.
There was a clear bobble and a clear moment, I mean, split second, where Amaury got, bucked a bit, but recovered immediately. And just the entire rest of that line, and obviously he opened up such a big lead in his run. I saw that and thought, no one is touching this. I mean, not Loic, and I honestly wasn't even thinking Danny was gonna.
But we knew that in that pedal section, actually it was at the end of the rock section where Amaury lost his pedal, or he slipped his pedal and had to get clicked in the exact wrong moment, because that's where the sprint started, with that long pedal section. And we knew that Amaury lost some time there, and that's also where Danny then got it back.
Talk a little bit about Leger versus Snowshoe. I don't know, for me, Loic and Amaury and Leger was my favorite. That actually, yes, all of the drama of Snowshoe, but those two, their respective runs in Leger, to me, were just mind-blowing. And this is a really weird thing to say, but Amaury and Leger throws this monster rundown where it's not perfect. He's making mistakes, but he is so flat out and committed, gets through that, deservingly wins. But I have to say, I've been talking about that Loic's run there, where he loses, I think, by 2 seconds. And I'm like, I don't think I've ever seen anybody ride a bicycle that good before. Like, Loic's run was very fast, and also kind of perfect. And I don't know what to say about that, but I'm curious if you have a perspective on that.
Well, that's the thing. Like, yes, it was perfect, but you know, imperfection is faster.
It's so messed
like
up.
pushing the limits further to where you make mistakes, but you can recover from them, or where you get a little out of control. That's where you know that you're riding the limit.
Yeah.
So if both of your wheels are going sideways, like they were for Amaury there, he knows, okay, well, that is the limit, and I found it right there now. I just need to make sure it doesn't go too far over it.
Yeah.
So I stay on the bike. But on a World Cup run, if you don't get really, really close to that limit or even slightly over it, you will never win. And well, the crazy thing is Loic was at a level this year where he could almost ride controlled and be up there, but not when there is an Amaury who then just pushes it so much further and goes a little over the limit and keeps it together. I mean, that could go wrong, you know, if you push it too far and those two wheels drift and you cannot get them back, then you're out. So, and in that case, Loic would win. But if you're at that level, and we saw it for both of them in snowshoe then, not going perfectly because they were both pushing it, and then those mistakes happened, which in snowshoe had a bigger consequence than it did in Léger, because in Léger we had wide open grass sections where you could just, you know, like pin it, and if you pin it a little too far, maybe you just go, it puts you out a little wider at the exit of a turn, which doesn't necessarily mean the end of the world. But if you push it in snowshoe and you get offline, you might end up in front of a big boulder.
And I guess talking about this, you know, imperfection can be faster. Fair, though, wouldn't we kind of have to say Danny through the rock gardens in snowshoe probably about as clean and perfect as you could ride that?
Yes. I would say so. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it looked kind of effortless. And I think that's a bit of why, from the, you know, idiot's point of view, it wasn't as impressive. He wasn't monstering his way through this. He just was like, oh, apparently there's nothing there.
Yeah.
It's like, well, unless you've watched everyone else in that section.
Well, you could say Danny Hart has a lot more experience than the other two.
Yeah.
The other two are younger than him. And in that rock garden, you did need that experience. Now, both the other riders, Amaury and Loic, were pushing really, really, really hard, and both of them made their mistakes. That's why they didn't win.
I'm curious, how much time are you spending these days at these World Cup stops talking with the riders? And, you know, so that's question one. And I guess question two is, do you feel like you then have a pretty good handle right before the race or coming into to finals of like, so and so's on it today?
Yeah, I try to be around. Obviously, I have my other stuff going on, a couple of emails per day. But I mean, it's good to be there early and get the atmosphere, get to see what's going on up there on the track. But also I try not to bother the riders too much before the race by constantly going to talk to them. If it's natural, you know, if we meet on the road or in the paddock, I'll talk to them and I ask them how it's going. But I'm not constantly like going after them and say, hey, what tire are you putting on today? And how you feeling?
How you feeling?
Yeah. So if it's natural, just as friends, then yes. And so, yes, I do get a good feeling, but those predictions are impossible.
Yeah.
Well, this year you could say one of the two Frenchies usually.
Yeah.
Even though Danny was fast in a lot of qualifiers, but then just couldn't get it down at the final run, which is why even for this one I didn't put him up top. I thought it was going to be one of the other two. But then I think for once, even though their performance was there, I mean, they were riding super fast, but they both made smaller or bigger mistakes. Loic made bigger ones. It was kind of, for his standards, it was a messy run.
Yeah.
For Amaury, not so much.
Yeah.
But there was that one mistake that cost him the win.
Yeah.
So for once it was the opposite, where Danny put down the solid run for the final. But yeah, so good on him. I mean, it's good to see more winners up there.
Yeah.
And
it's hard to think about framing this fact, and so I like your perspective. I believe Danny was on 7 out of 8 podiums. That is either you can view this as a unbelievable consistency, or you can view this as a what's happening, 7 out of 8 podiums, but not getting that first place. I don't know, as a former, thinking of that or viewing that as a former racer, how would you be inclined to frame that fact?
Well, the same topic with Troy Brosnan.
Yeah.
He's been on the on the podium for years.
Yeah.
It comes down to that, to pushing that limit, Obviously, all of these riders are incredibly fast, but then how much risk do you want to take at the final, and how are you able to handle being slightly out of control? And maybe some riders who have had their injuries in the past, they cannot go that far out of the comfort zone anymore. I mean, you have to be able to go out of the comfort zone if you want to race World Cups, but at some point you will just try to win races by not risking it all, by just being 100% accurate. I mean, if you look at Greg Minnaar, he's not going out there and just keeping those brakes open a couple of seconds longer than he should be, and then see what happens. He just tries to do it with 100% accuracy, and he got really close twice this year.
Yeah.
But then there was that one guy in front of him who just was ready to keep those brakes open for just a tiny bit longer and take the risk, and then managed to keep it together. And that's a tough one. I would say a tough one the older you get, because the younger ones, they come and they don't think that much, and just take those risks. But I mean, as said, Danny 100% deserved that win. He was there all season long, won many of the qualifiers, and finally took it at the final, which is super cool.
Yeah. True or false? This is the thing you say the most during race commentaries. You constantly are, let's say in the nicest way, encouraging riders to keep the brakes open. That's your one thing always, right? I mean, that's your kind of go-to dance move. It's like, guys, are you trying to win? Get off the brakes. Is that a fair assessment of your guidance and advice?
Well, I don't know if it's a real advice. It's more a saying.
Just
Well, I guess to a certain point you have to if you want to win, but obviously only where it makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, what are the 3 most impressive things you witnessed this season on the men's side?
On the men's side, well, we already talked about Léger
Yeah.
Amaury's run.
Yeah.
That is one.
You think that's your number 1? Would you call that number 1?
I would say so, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was amazing.
Yeah.
Hmm. Well, that for me stands out. Whether that is a bigger performance than something else, I don't know, but it's something that I remember and a lot of other people
Yeah.
remember. I mean, Loic surviving that huge crash in Fort William and then ride top 10 the next day and then win again next week, right? He won
so, yeah.
Leogang. So that is number 2, I'd say.
I think you're right. I think you're 2 for 2.
And then probably the overall consistency that Loic laid down through the whole season. I mean, both of them did. Amaury did too. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been up there. I would have to recap the whole season in my head now to figure out anything better, if there was.
I'll give you a different number 3 option. We'll see. You might disagree with this. You're the historian. We're calling you the historian. I'm not. I'll go my number 3 might be, I think, the way that Loic and Amaury talked about each other and that battle all season. And maybe this happens more in DH than, and I should be remembering this, but it really seemed very genuine to me. You know, Loic gets his first, overall win, and he just kept saying, like, Amaury deserved this as much as me.
Mm-hmm.
We were both winners. Like, you can't. And it's like the guy who just came in first kept kind of making the case that, like, there were 2 of us, with this pretty epic battle all season long. We were both right there. It's thoughts.
You're 100% right. That is maybe even number 2 and not number 1.
I don't know. That crash was pretty wild. So
yes. But the fact on how they keep that friendship up, even though they are the biggest competitors on track, is really amazing.
Yeah.
And the fact that he talked about that after the win is not such a big fact, because once you won, it's easy to be the good guy and say, yeah, he would have deserved it just as much as I did. But the fact that how they acted together before the race, like they would still hang out together, have fun together. And he even said in an interview that it kind of sucks that they cannot train together during practice anymore, because it's kind of a conflict of interest. Because then one would show the other one his lines, and well, no matter how good of friends you are, but it's still a World Cup race. But then off the track, they're friends, and this is it is really, really cool.
Yeah, and I I don't know those guys, but it just seems so genuine. And I think I heard Amaury say, I loved his post race kind of takes. They just seem so genuine and honest, and it makes you really, really like the guy, I think, a lot. But I think he said he called Loic his best friend and his best enemy. And you could see how devastated he was, after Danny's run. And it's like, yeah, he should have been. Like, that dude biked his brains out this season. And I don't know, I just thought it was an incredible display of competition and of sportsmanship and of friendship. and nobody was easing up on the other because they were friends. I don't know. I really thought it was something remarkable.
Yeah.
I can't think of not a lot of analogies to that in other sports or disciplines kind of come to mind.
Yeah, you hardly ever see that. And
Yeah.
it's really, really hard, like it's hard to keep that separate so you don't let the competition on track influence your friendship or like your relation that's off track. It should be something completely natural, but it's also something natural that it isn't.
Yeah, yeah. I want to ask about the women's side. Give me the 3 most impressive things you witnessed on the women's side, or we can combine that with 3 biggest takeaways from the women's side.
Well, I mean, one of the 3, not saying it's the biggest, one of the 3 is definitely Miriam and Tane coming back from injury to World Championships and then taking the first 2 spots. That is amazing, but maybe not the number 1, because it was also kind of because Tracy and Maureen were still in the game for the overall at the World Cup, and they had a lot more to deal with than the 2 coming back riders. The 2 riders who came back from injury, they had nothing to lose there. They could just show up and perform, and obviously it's an amazing performance to come back and become world champion, but at the same time, you know what pressure Tracy Hanna was on for the whole second half of the season, and that she was kind of struggling with that. She really, really wanted to take that overall. And like, if that becomes too important in your head, then it might mess with your riding. So, which explains a little bit why the 2 who came back from injury, why they were able to just go and win. That's why I'm saying it's one of the 3, but not necessarily the biggest moment.
Curious how, if Rachel's not injured, I'm curious kind of your assessment of where we're at on the women's side of things. I mean, there was a time when Rachel, like, nobody was coming close here, right? So I don't really want to ask the question because I think it's kind of just unfair to everybody who's out there racing. Like how different would this season have been if Rachel was competing? So I won't ask that, but I will ask just your assessment in terms of where we're currently sitting on the women's side. If we hopefully have a healthy Rachel back for next season, are you expecting competition to be tighter than it's ever been? How would you size up,
No, you can ask that question, because even this year already it would have been tighter than it's ever been, because Rachel was beaten at the first race.
True.
So it was Tane who took the first one, then it was Rachel who took the second one, and it was Tracy who took the third. And that's where Rachel was still healthy. So she, the race, it was a lot different than in the past where Rachel was dominating. Now there were other women, Tane, Tracy, Rachel herself, and later on Maureen, who could win races, and Miriam if she was healthy. So there is a field that could battle it out, and yes, the season would have been a different one, but not in the sense of Rachel would have just smoked them all. So the competition was there, and I'm really, really looking forward to a season where they're all back. It's gonna be a good battle next year.
I know. Heal up, Rachel. Heal up. Related, well, let's see. I threw that in, so I messed up where we are in our 2 or 3 biggest takeaways. I think we'll call that 2. Got a third?
What was 2 then?
Well, 2 was kind of we're filing that under takeaway.
Yeah.
And the question of just how
takeaway.
Yeah.
Well, Germany is back.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nina Hoffmann, I hope she finds some consistency for next year, because she was on a good roll at some point of the season. Was really close in Léger, but then had that amazing run where she lost the shoe. No, that wasn't Léger. That was Andorra, where she lost the shoe, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, obviously we need to mention Kabiru. The way she currently rides, she could be dominating soon. Well, she's definitely going to be up there with Tane and Rachel and the other. Well, those 5 are going to be Tane, Rachel, Miriam, Kabiru, and who did I forget now? Miriam.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's going to be fun. Next year's going to be good.
Yeah.
Tangent question. Just because it's kind of in the news, it's a current thing. Women competing in Red Bull Rampage. You know, Casey Brown was just competing in this Proving Grounds qualifier. And I guess I'm just curious, you know, we were just talking with Ming Getz here on that couch. And Ming was talking about her interest in competing in Rampage someday, and that, you know, in her circles and the women she's competing with, there's a number of them who are. And, you know, so this year, I guess, Red Bull decided to have Casey compete in Proving Grounds. She had a crash, and she wrote really well about kind of what happened in that. But I guess I'm just curious on your take, opening up Rampage, letting the women rampage.
Yeah, I mean, you know, why would you not?
Yeah.
I mean, it's at the last, it's their own decision whether they want to ride down this mountain or not. And if a woman is confident that she can do it, why would you not let her?
Yeah.
I'm not that much in the freestyle scene that I could now name 5 women who are capable of it, but possibly there are. I mean, if you look at social media, the tricks that some women do nowadays, they're absolutely amazing. And Rampage is less about the technical riding and more about your fear of heights. You know, if you can deal with the heights, then it is really huge jumps, yes. Yeah. But huge jumps are technically not that difficult. But it is difficult to deal with that exposure up there. Yeah. And that is something I cannot deal with. But there's many men who can't, and there's probably many women who can. So, I mean, up there, nobody's gonna just turn off their brain and just go for it, because the consequences there are way too big.
Yeah.
So you can almost trust that if someone is not 100% confident that he's gonna get down there safely, he's not gonna ride off the start. So yes, well, why not let them try?
Yeah. Agreed. We're in agreement. Couple questions about the World Cup series in general. Would you be in favor of adding more stops
to the World Cup?
Yeah.
Yes. 100%.
How many more would you if you're the new commissioner? 1, 2, 3, or more?
10 in total would be cool, I
Yeah.
think. I mean, yes, a lot of the teams will say, whoa, we don't have the budget for that. And I know this is an issue. I had a team myself.
Yeah.
But there will always be a way. Like, you have to figure out somehow. And then, yes, we're now at the end of the season, so it's a bad moment to ask a rider that question because they're all
Fried.
they're all tired.
Yeah.
I just think no matter how long or short a season is, you're always tired at the end. That's your mental approach. If you know from the start you have to go through 10 races, you wouldn't be tired after the 8th because you clearly have your mindset, I have to go through 2 more. And the peak, when it all counts, is at that last one, which was now this weekend in snowshoe, which is why everyone let out all of their energy in the last 2 weeks, which was the World Championships and the World Cup Finals. Now, if the World Cup Finals was in 3 weeks, then riders would not yet be that exhausted, because they would be still focused. They wouldn't party that much after the World Championship or after the snowshoe race, because they know there's still 2 more races coming. So I think it is possible to do more races. I mean, if you look at the cross-country racers, they might not have as many World Cups, but they have all sorts of other races that they go to, including stage races. And they now even continue to go to a test event in Tokyo. So their season is actually a lot longer. It is a different impact onto your body if you race cross country or downhill. Way different, not even comparable. But still, the cross country racers do more races, and I think we could handle more.
Yeah. Maybe a related question. What are your best ideas for improving the World Cup Series? And maybe we'll say, maybe number 1 is let's go to 10 stops. I love that. I think that'd be really cool. You got anything else?
Well, first of all, I must say that I'm extremely happy with our sport. I think it's absolutely amazing. And yes, there's always stuff you can improve, but I don't feel the need to constantly change it up in its roots, because it is an amazing sport and it does evolve. It's not that there's nothing new, right?
Yeah.
So if you look at the jumps we had in snowshoe, how big they were, and then you look at wheel sizes nowadays riders are riding a bigger front wheel and a smaller rear wheel, and so on. There's stuff going on without constantly pushing. We need to change something, because it really is super exciting as it is in its original form. I mean, it hasn't changed that much since the 90s. It's downhill racing, yes, the bikes have evolved, but we all agree we just had an incredibly exciting season. Some of them would call it the most exciting ever. And that's without putting the whole sport upside down every year. That's by just
letting it be. We should get going and wrap this up. So maybe my last question will be, funniest thing you either saw this season or the funniest thing that happened to you this season?
Well, the shoe The shoe was quite funny.
Yeah.
Probably not for her at
Yeah.
that time, but with Nina Hoffman. Do you have something in mind?
No. I just can't believe with all these characters and all these stops and post-race celebrations and parties that you don't have a single anecdote.
Yeah, you think I can tell them in public?
Fair enough. So would your top 10 answers to this question, they're kind of classified?
Yeah, I'd say so.
Okay. Well, if nothing jumped out, aside from, we'll just call it the shoe incident, it was a good wrap-up party in Snowshoe?
Yes, although it was weird. They closed everything so early.
Huh.
Yeah.
Like, what time was stuff shutting down?
Well, in town at midnight, and then the official party at 1, and then we found some third bar back in the woods, but they also shut down at 2, and we're like, okay, we're running out of options. Gotta go home.
This is a problem. I think the more time we spend together, the more I realize, like, you just really don't sleep. So it's like 2 a.m. It's been a full day, and you still got another 3-4 hours in you.
Not always. Okay.
But just most
I
ways.
guess at the World Cup final, you have to be ready for it.
Okay, we'll call that my second to last question. Single biggest thing you're looking forward to about this coming season, next year? Biggest question you have, or the thing you're most curious about?
Can Aaron Gwynn make his comeback?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a real good answer.
Yeah.
'Cause man, if he can return,
That would be amazing. Well, and then another one is, can Greg Minnaar get another win? That would be, he was so close this year.
Yeah, 2 good ones. Man, yeah. Well, and maybe a third would be, does Danny start putting it together? In terms of not just landing on a podium, but he sure finished strong.
Yeah.
If he's able to keep that going into next year. But it's funny. We started by saying, like, you were like, yeah, every year we kind of say this was the best season ever. And yet actually thinking about next season, there are some reasons to think that it actually could be once again.
Yes. I mean, the question is, does a broader top make it more exciting or less exciting? Because now we had a clear fight between 2 guys.
Yeah.
Even though on a race-to-race basis, Troy was always there too. But then when it came to the overall, it was clear between the 2 Frenchies. But now, how would it be if suddenly there's Greg and Aaron back in that game on that same level, and you see a different winner at every weekend? Does that make the season more or less exciting? I mean, how would it be if the final wasn't only gonna be the big showdown for 2 riders, but for 4 riders?
Yeah.
I mean, that would be something we've not seen in a long time, or ever.
You did, with a lot of pride in your eyes, remind me that you won in the prediction game, right, for World Cup.
Did I have pride?
Yeah, a lot of pride. I saw a lot of pride.
That was sarcasm. That wasn't pride.
Are you willing to make a prediction
for next year?
Yeah.
Ouch. For the overall.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of smart money here, I think. The safe bet. Well, who's the safe bet?
Probably Amaury.
That's what I would say.
Yeah.
No disrespect, Loic. Or just get angry and...
I don't know, though, because Loic got to that point where he can control stuff.
Yeah.
And where he doesn't necessarily have to push the limits that much.
Mm-hmm.
Although, yeah, if Amaury does push it, then
You got to kind of push too.
do you know an interesting fact? If you put down, or if you calculate all the race times all together, if you add them all together, Amaury would have won the overall. If you take all race times together, he's ahead of Loic.
Do we know by like roughly how much?
Um,
Like a second or two, or 5 seconds, or
I don't know how much it was. It has to do with the 8th place in Fort William.
Yeah.
After
Got
the
it.
crash of Loic. Maybe we should calculate it again, but it was already the case before going into snowshoe.
Yeah. Interesting.
And now it's even more.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, this was a fun one and a tense one, and here's hoping that a year from now we'll be back talking about how next year was now the best season we've ever seen. And I actually think there is really good reasons why that might be the case. So
yes,
it's a good time in the sport, it seems. I mean, again, I'd defer to you. You've seen a lot and you've been around, but
well, it was huge in the 90s, but that was kind of bubble.
Mm-hmm.
And then when that one exploded, everything had to start not from scratch, but from a solid base. Well, and since then, since the early 2000s, it has been growing steadily, but healthy. It's not on a bubble anymore. Yeah. It's now how do you say? What's the word there in English? A stable sport, an established sport.
Mm-hmm.
That's the word. That can keep on growing. It's not just a big hype and wow, a new sport and let's just throw a lot of sponsor money on it.
Yeah.
It's now really what it is, and obviously Red Bull has added a lot to that with all the broadcasting they do. Yes, I'm really, really happy to be part of this and having been part of it for such a long time and keep going with it.
Yeah. Well, here's to you keep going with it. And on that note, let's get some food. We've got another conversation later today.
Oh boy.
We're also talking about maybe trying to sneak a bike ride in. So we've got our work cut out for us here. But this has been a fun one and a nice job recapping this year and putting it in some context for us. So well done, sir.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. We are out and time for food.
Cool. Yeah, if we want to get riding, we better hurry.